Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Abstract Cafe, where ideas they shape, thoughts find them, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. One of his advocacy using plants to make cities healthier, cooler, and more beautiful, rather than Mr. Joshua Harrison.
Hi, Daniel. Great
Well,
to be here.
yes, welcome, Mr. Joshua on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Surely. My name's Josh Harrison. I am one of the co founders of a green infrastructure company called Leaf Island, which basically is looking to use plants to help regenerate cities and bring them back into balance with the environment at large. I also run a climate center called the Center for the Study of the Force Majeure which is based in Santa Cruz, California, at the University of California at Santa Cruz.
Mr. Joshua Harrison, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about your Leaf Island, the company itself using plants to make cities healthier, cooler, and more beautiful. So, tell us, your advocacy frames plants, water, and waste not are problems to be managed, but as a heroes of the urban story, what is the single biggest mental shift we need to make to start seeing our cities not as separate from nature, but as a part of it?
Well, I think that's a really important question. I think the United States is probably the worst example of this in the world. So we're leading in this. And um, we have spent an awful lot of time and energy making barriers between ourselves and the world we live in. I mean, what's on the picture right here is a giant air conditioner. That's if it gets too hot. We burn energy to keep us cool. We don't if we want to go someplace, we spend a lot of energy to make it go faster. And in all of these things, we lose connection to the fact that we're all part of these integrated systems. And one of the most important systems we have is, how we stay cool. And that's actually through the evaporation of water. Mostly on the land, it's mostly through plants, and on the ocean, it's direct. So that evapotranspiration through a technology that we all know and love, it's what makes plants green. It's called photosynthesis, also gives us oxygen that we breathe and allows us to live peacefully. But it is nature's greatest way to cool the planet. It's actually more important than carbon in the atmosphere. The water vapor has more to do with keeping us cool than carbon is keeping us hot. So, and that balance getting out of sync is one of the things that's wreaking havoc on our environmental systems right now. And cities have been built in much of the world to not have much greenery. So they lose the benefit of that cooling. They lose the benefit of that oxygen. They lose the benefit of the fact that when you're in a landscape, you generally feel better than when you're in a hard surface place. And capturing ways to bring us back into a better balance with plants is a way to really help connect not only our natural functions, not only do plants help us stay cooler in the winter, and if we're talking about green roofs, they can keep you warm, they can insulate you in the winter, and cooler in the summer, and they can insulate your buildings in the winter. They can also do things, they purify the air. One of the many urban issues, we have several major urban issues that have come up, heat being one of them, but also air pollution, particularly in poorer neighborhoods of cities that have been, where there's a lot more environmental damage going on. And in a city like New York, one of the great health issues is asthma, which is aggravated by dust particles off of cars and factories and all kinds of things. And one of the things that plants do is those tiniest particles, the ones that cause the most damage in your lungs, what they call the sub 2.5 micron particles, those adhere, they stick to plants. So one of the many benefits that you don't see, one of the many invisible benefits of having a lot of greenery around, is they help clean the air from these tiny particles that cause a great deal of damage. They're the largest single aggravator for childhood asthma, for example, as well as many other health issues. So plants really give us a lot, and they do a lot, and they're not nearly as expensive as some of the other alternatives. So we should be using more of them.
Yes, definitely. We should have more green inside our cities.
Mhm.
And you talk about nature, thermodynamics. Could you give us a powerful example of how city can function more like a forest ecosystem where one system waste becomes another lifeblood?
I'd like to start when I talk about that with a couple of examples. The first one is, imagine it's a midsummer's day and you're in the middle of the Amazon on the equator, and you're standing in the middle of the rainforest. How hot would you think you would be?
Well, hot for sure.
Right, but actually you'd be somewhere between 85 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's hot and it's humid. There's no doubt about it. Now, imagine you stay on that same latitude and you go across the Atlantic into Africa. You have to go a little bit further north, so you're out of the rainforest and you're in, say, the Sahel, which has no plants. How hot do you think it would be on that same day with that same amount of sunshine floating
It double or triple,
down? Well,
especially climate change.
not quite, but you're right. It'd be somewhere between 120 and maybe these days 135 to even 140 degrees. And that difference is the power of plants.
Hmm.
So and you know that because if you've been out on a hot summer day and you go underneath a tree and you from the sunshine to the tree, you immediately feel the benefit of the shade.
Yes,
What you
cooler.
feel in it, yeah, it's immediately cooler. And in addition to the shade you're getting all sorts of benefits you can't see from all of the evaporation of water that's going out through photosynthesis. Another piece of that fits in cities. So not only do you look at the cooling is a city like New York City, which is one of the largest cities in the United States at least. They generate millions and millions of pounds of glass, broken glass, of concrete, of rubble. They also generate tons and tons and tons of styrofoam. Styrofoam is actually one of the greatest by volume. It's one of the most significant elements of most landfills across the planet because because it doesn't compress very well and it's light and it takes up a lot of volume. So, but then you think about a natural system, you think about nature, and nature doesn't throw anything away. Nature doesn't recognize waste. Even the word waste, it's a totally human concept that we've constructed to deal with things we just want to throw away and hide. But you don't throw away and hide anything in nature. Every output is another input. There's no food waste. That's just food for a different set of animals or critters or plants. So we need to treat cities in the same way. We can't continue to have cities that throw garbage away indefinitely and just take new stuff in. Eventually the garbage fills up and the sources of the new things fall apart unless you start to reuse them in cycles and you start to make things more circular. So you're taking advantage of the things that you would otherwise be throwing away. Another sort of example of that is in the highest single point on the United States eastern seaboard on the Atlantic coast from Florida up to the top tip of Maine is what was known as the Fresh Kills landfill. It's the garbage dump on Staten Island of New York City. And until they stopped growing it about 20 years ago and they finally gave up on using it. It's the single highest point on the ocean in the United States, on the eastern seaboard of the United States. That's remarkable. And so we need,
Remarkable indeed.
so it's now been turned into a park. They're taking a lot of advantage of one of the things that happen when you throw a lot of human garbage away. It generates a lot of natural gas or methane. So they're actually using that natural gas and methane both to power the needs of the park and also to feed some of the power plants. So they're taking some value back, and now there's some ball fields on the ground and other kinds of urban amenities. But it's an amazingly artificial construction that did not need to happen. So one of the things we do with Leaf Island is we take one of those three big landfill ingredients that I talked about, styrofoam, and we upcycle it. That is, say, we reuse all the things that make styrofoam difficult as a waste product. Our advantages when you think of turning it into an artificial soil: it's light, it doesn't compress, and it's stable. If you protect it from sunlight and you don't pour solvents on it, because then it's a pretty stable substance. So what you're looking at behind me on the screen here is a industrial factory that manufactures precision aircraft parts and needs a temperature controlled surface, and this is the roof. And because it's a roof, most roofs of most flat buildings are not designed to carry a lot of weight. So making a soil substitute out of something as lightweight as styrofoam allows you to put a really rich soil, a really productive soil on all kinds of places that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to put soil, because water is heavy and soil is heavy, and the two of them together, and you add plants, and a lot of roofs can't handle that kind of weight. So what you take advantage of a product that is designed to be lightweight, has a lot of air in it, and suddenly you have something that actually becomes very functional and very practical, as in a very, very different purpose from which it was originally designed to be. And that's the basis of the soil that we use in our green roofs and our other water retaining programs that we have.
Mr. Josh, let's talk about recycled materials. What is the surprising or beautiful building material being created from urban waste that challenges our idea of what construction should look like?
Well, I don't know that it's quite as challenging an idea, but the richest and most successful reuse of material right now is happening. It's happening in Canada and Vancouver. It's happening all over the country now, and is the reuse is the using the kinds of tree stems, the kinds of tree trunks that were starting to catch fire, are part of the results of what's causing the massive fires, and repurposing them into a kind of super plywood that they call mass timber, and putting that wood fiber, which now is really basically carbon, into buildings, and therefore getting it off of the landscape where it will burn and parking it into a stable existence as a building material that technically is actually stronger than concrete and more fire resistant when well designed and built. And that's one of the biggest transformations in building that's happening right now. Well, it's been happening in Europe since the 1970s. It's been happening in Canada certainly since the early 2000s, and it's starting to take off in the United States. We are behind the eight ball, as often is the case these days.
What is one specific actionable policy change, a zoning code update, a tax incentive, or a new performance standard that is proven to unlock rapid adoption of these ideas?
Okay, let me give a couple of examples there. The example, I think you're absolutely right to point out that a lot of what's hindering a rapid uptake in green infrastructure is that we built our building codes and our zoning codes without thinking about what green infrastructure might look like. And so, of course, we're very concerned about safety, and the building industry is very conservative in general. So we make a lot of rules that make certain kinds of green infrastructure difficult. So here's a question. Germany is not a country you think of as having lax rules. You might think of it as a fairly heavily regulated society. Yet in the last 15 years, Germany has gone from solar roof penetration in the domestic solar market of almost invisible, less than 1%, to maybe 35 to 40%. And it did most of that growth in a roughly 5-year period. And it did that in one very specific change. They changed their zoning regulations so that if you were a homeowner and you had a contract with a solar company and you were ready to build, they guaranteed no more than 24-hour turnaround for you to get approval to make that solar installation happen. That was the single quickest, most important thing. Similarly, and so that change allowed an extraordinary, almost almost a logarithmic growth, an exponential growth of solar adoption in a country that doesn't really pride itself on how much sun it has, but every place has sunshine. In the United States, there are a series of regulations that are just starting to change. California just changed its laws for housing, and particularly for low-income multifamily housing, from requiring a tremendous amount of review to assuming that if it's already in an existing urban environment that's already had construction on it, it no longer needs anywhere near the same complexity of environmental review that had previously, until literally just a few months ago, been required. That change is expected to transform the housing market in California. In New York City,
Interesting, Miss Joss.
Sure, go ahead.
Interesting indeed. And before we continue our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in 5th season. Abstract poetry in 2nd season. I'm a book 101 review in 5th season too. Comedy 101 in 2nd season. I'm a book 101 in 5th season as well. Geography 101 in 4th season. I'm a baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in 3rd season. And Movie 101 review and Music 101 in 4th season. And Science 101 and Sex 101 in its 1st season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Joss, what emerging technology or scientific understanding is poised to take this entire field to the next level?
Well, I think the greatest technology leap that we need is going to be in storage of intermittent natural energy sources like solar and wind, and that's battery technology. And that's moving along quite rapidly in all kinds of ways. So I'm hoping that in the next few years, we'll start to see some massive transformations in how we can store it. But for me, I think the most interesting technology that's coming along in the building market particularly is, well, I guess it's a paired thing. On the one hand, we're starting to see biophilic surfaces in insides of buildings, which is to say we're starting to see plants and wood and non-industrialized materials starting to become more frequent inside buildings, and those have huge wellness benefits for the people who actually live and work in those buildings. So I'm happy to see that happening. But I think on the technology side, I think we're starting to see massive, massive improvements in solar generated window films. We're getting to the point where it's going to become cost effective to not only have solar panels on a roof, but to actually use your windows as collectors of solar energy. They'll also provide shade, light shade, and other things, and we'll start to really massively increase the amount of geography in an urban area that can collect solar energy directly and put it into the grid. And I think that's going to be an exciting thing, because that's going to mean you don't necessarily have to put solar installations on your housing. You can actually use your windows as solar collectors. They're not always going to be oriented in the best way, but you're not really looking for perfect efficiency in every individual panel. You're looking for the aggregate efficiency of your space.
Interesting innovation, Mr. Josh. Interesting. And after all your research, what is your single most reason for hope? What is a sign convinces you that this is not just a niche idea, but it's a future of how we build our cities?
Well, I think the single most important piece of hope is that this is getting, it's going to be that this is becoming economically more and more sensible. And the first place we're going to see that, I'm going to say, is again, it's solar. I mean, solar has now become the cheapest form of energy by far that we have, with wind a close second and natural gas a not so close third. So the economics of solar are so cheap that it doesn't make sense on a business sense to build other kinds of power. Um, and aligned with that are going to be a great deal of interest in storing water in urban areas. I mean, one of the other problems we didn't really address, but of the things that green infrastructure really helps quite a bit, is that most big urbanized cities have water systems, sewage systems, water recovery systems that are very expensive, and they're really matched to the number of sinks and toilets that you have. So they're not very good when rainfall comes in and overwhelms the system. They have these, typically have the same system. They call it a combined water and sewer system. So in New York City, I'll just use that because that's the city I'm based in. When it rains more than 7/10 of an inch in an hour, it reaches the maximum carrying capacity of the system. And so every amount of rain above and beyond that basically floods the system out, and you start pouring untreated sewage into the riverways and wherever. And so solving that problem is really expensive if you have to build new water treatment plants. It's really cheap if you use natural systems that collect water otherwise and keep it out of the sewage system. So I think the combination of economics, the combination of the fact that energy, solar energy and wind energy are becoming incredibly inexpensive and therefore much more sensible to be using, the fact that you have stormwater, heat, and cooling effects, all of which are much better handled through natural processes like plants. I think all of those are combining to really push the development of green infrastructure in urban areas to a level that's pretty significant. Plus, we have really powerful examples like Singapore, which has already gone far down that road. And, mainland China, which is both one of the biggest abusers with the amount of coal plants, but also one of the single largest manufacturer of solar facilities in the world, and also the place that's building more green cities than anywhere else in the world right now. So we have great models that are really successful that are happening on global scales. And I think that too will lead the laggards like us in the United States forward into the world we need to be in.
Mr. Joshua Harrison, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your projects, or your business itself?
All right. Well, I'm more than welcome to please go visit our website, leafisland.org. That's two words, leafisland.org. Happy to address any questions, any thoughts, and I'll more than happy to talk with anyone who's interested in green technology and blue-green technology or any of the other things we do.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Joshua Harrison, because if you support him, for sure more and more empowering advocacy like this to come. So, Mr. Joshua, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure, Dan.
More to come, people. See you soon.